Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Adrian here for Digital Dojos, and today we are going to be talking about Apple's WWDC 2017 event, the Worldwide Developers Conference. This is something I've covered year after year. Historically, it's been one of the busiest days for our site and just in general in the tech industry because, as with any big company like Apple, these are really big announcements. And while they are focused on more of the app developer at its core and the software and things that are coming out, there's always some sort of conjunction with the hardware announcements, which we saw this year. So with that, let's get into the event, what was announced, and really kind of what really matters in terms of the big overall image of Apple and these announcements, and giving you some of my thoughts in between there. So first and foremost, they broke it down into 6 big announcements because there's 6 categories, and it was a pretty long event at that. And the first one, they kept it short and simple. It's about tvOS, which is Apple TV's operating system that they overhauled not too long ago. It's getting Amazon Prime support. So now finally, if you're an Amazon Prime user and you enjoy Amazon Video, it's now going to finally be coming to Apple TV. Long rumored, finally going to be coming out soon. And that's really all there is to know about tvOS right now. WatchOS. So, with the launch of Apple Watch 2, there's been a lot more hardware improvements and just, much of a big step from the Apple Watch 1, even though they look exactly the same. And WatchOS, the update to this is coming out with like new watch faces, improved watch faces like kaleidoscope personalization, challenges for your activity, improved challenges for your activity monitor, a vertical dock and control center, so you can easily now control things like music, and just you have a more fluid UI when it comes to controlling things from your watch. But nothing crazy exciting, nice refinements, much needed, and things are taking much better advantage of the improved hardware in the latest Apple Watch update. But the bigger announcement, Mac OS. Mac OS is now, the next iteration of it is going to be called High Sierra. That's right, H-I-G-H Sierra. And you can think of it as a refinement. They didn't want to go with a whole new OS. They're implementing off of what was Mac OS Sierra. No Mac OS Mojave or Mac OS Monterey, even though they have trademarks on those. Right now, we're just getting High Sierra, which at this point, I feel like you should just call it Sierra. But anyways, you're getting a lot of improvements at the core of this update. Yes, there's apps like Safari that are getting auto blocking and tracking prevention, which is, nice little updates to get. But really at the core of it, what you're getting is a much more faster modern OS in terms of the file system, which is known for being HFS, which is a very old file system, is finally getting updated to APFS, if I'm not mistaken. It's Apple's file system. And that's what iOS is based off of. So a much faster file system, whether it's copying videos across or duplicating a file, it's much more instant. And they showcase a demo of this, but you're going to get a much more faster and modern file system while it still looks completely the same on the user end and the GUI end. Video-wise, they're updating to H.265 encoding, so that means better playback and editing for things like 4K video. They're implementing better support for Thunderbolt 3 external GPUs, so you can get, use much more powerful hardware with your Macs. Metal VR, so they're expanding into the VR space and supporting, better throughput overall for graphics performance on Macs, whether it's, dare I say, gaming on a Mac or just, general performance like video editing and day-to-day usage. You're getting much better graphic performance out of your Macs with this update. Now, the update is out today for developers, developer beta, I should say, and then the public beta for people who just want to test it out will be available in June. Now, as far as the actual Macs go, what came out? So they updated everything from the iMacs all the way down to the MacBooks, MacBook Airs, and MacBook Pros, including the one I have here. And basically, this is a big move for them to get on the latest Intel Kaby Lake processor. So all of those are going to be introduced with the new Kaby Lake processors. However, things like the iMac got substantial updates like higher displays, so 500 nits better, which is 43% brighter. The 21 inches got some pretty big upgrades in terms of RAM. So now it can go to 32 gigs of RAM, while the 27-inch can go to 64 gigs of RAM. Fusion drives are now standard on Macs, which the Fusion drive technology is like the SSD plus hard drive combo. You have updated graphics like the Intel Iris Plus graphics that they're integrating. And the 21.5 inch model for the iMacs anyways now gets the discrete graphics card option. Before, this was only available on the 27-inch, and it's going to be integrating with either the Radeon 570, 575, or 580. So those are your options when it comes to graphics cards on your iMacs. Now, the notebooks, MacBook Air, MacBook, and MacBook Pro all got those new Kaby Lake processors and slight hardware bumps in the CPU and performance, but nothing crazy. Just all surface level, or not even surface level. I should say all core hardware updates like the CPUs. Now, the big Mac announcement was that of the iMac Pro. And they showcased this. They didn't talk too much other than that this will be out in December, so later in the year. But this is the response to the kind of prosumer community integrating it into an all-in-one solution. So the iMac Pro, which, as I said in the keynote, is a very badass-looking iMac, and I have to agree it is. It comes in all space gray, including the keyboard and mouse are all space gray. And it's that 27-inch form factor. You can get it in an 8, 10, or 18-core Xeon processor spec, 80% improved cooling while still maintaining quiet, and that's something that I'd have to personally see to obviously, be able to verify. The Radeon Vega graphics is what it's going to be adapting, and this is like 16 gigs of VRAM, so really great graphics performance. 1080p FaceTime cameras, USB-C slots. I think 2 of them are getting added to the iMac Pro, and the starting price is going to be $5,000 for this pro-level machine. And not forgetting that this is an all-in-one design. And a 5K display. So all of that power packed into an all-in-one form factor. And personally, my favorite. I think the iMac has always been my favorite representation of the Mac. And while this is their response to the prosumer, which is very important because they dropped the ball with the Mac Pro and they've really kind of neglected that space, it was nice to see them step up and say, like, here's something that we're doing for the prosumers. We know they need better hardware. They know that they want more power and they want, more ports and so on and so forth. So it was nice to see them not for once like move everything standard over to USB-C, for example, like they did with the MacBook Pro. I think the approach they took with the iMac, and maybe it's because they had more space and capability, was a much better response. I'm sure people still want the Mac Pro and more modular support for like taking and upgrading parts, but I'm really interested in the iMac Pro. And of course, at the end of the day, you can argue the dollar value. You can build a better PC or Hackintosh. That's always going to be true. You're going to pay the Apple tax on this, but it is nice to see Apple doing something about it. Next up, and I think the most disappointing announcement, to be honest, is iOS 11. So everything that is, iOS they talked about in this video. And honestly, I can't even tell you what the standout feature is, to be honest. iOS 11 got some updates like the iMessage redesign app drawer. iMessage now supports Apple Payments. iMessage also has like a better way to back up and sync between iCloud, which makes synchronization across the devices that much more easier. All great stuff and stuff that is definitely needed. However, like that's really like the main thing that they focus on. iMessage this, iMessage that. Yeah, there's like Siri beta translation. It can translate across languages and stuff that is nice to have in Siri, but existed in third-party apps already. Portrait mode got some improvements. Control center is finally like minimalized into one UI rather than 2 pages. AirPlay 2 now supports multi-room audio, which is a nice touch. But those are like really the main things. They did an ARKit demo, which is going to be like integrated more into iOS and stuff like that, augmented reality, which is really great. And I think that in combination with the announcement they made for like VR for the Mac is a real big step in Apple showing that like they're moving towards these avenues that, the tech industry is interested in. And usually where Apple will kind of shy away from that stuff, I think, like stuff that may be kind of trendy. It's nice to see Apple moving towards that technology. And if Apple is known for doing anything, it's kind of taking a step back and waiting to perfect that technology rather than just jumping right into it. But it's nice to see them moving towards that direction, even if, whether or not there's a future in it. But iOS 11, to be honest, I think they did nice refinements off of iOS 10, but nothing that shows some sort of revolutionary or innovative step forward in terms of what a mobile OS should be. And I still think that there's just so much more that can be done and should have been done. Next up was the iPad Pro. They did some updates to the iPad Pro. It's 10.5 inches now, slimmer bezels on the left-hand side, only coming in at a pound, so super lightweight, yet super powerful with that A10X Fusion chip within it. That's a 6-core chip, by the way, in the iPad Pro. Support for USB 3.0 charging, which is faster charging, even though they want to move us again to USB-C. Like a new app called Files, which is basically like a cloud storage synchronization app. And they got a dock. iPad Pro now has like the Mac OS dock, and it's interesting because the iPad Pro specifically is like the closest they've come to that iOS/Mac OS like fusion, where a lot of people are like, we want a touchscreen Mac and so on and so forth. The iPad Pro is now slightly leaning in that direction. It's like an iOS. It's still iOS at its core, obviously, but it's taking Mac OS elements and implementing them. And maybe this is due to like the bigger screen, the faster hardware and whatnot. But yeah, it's an interesting take. And last, what Apple's calling the HomePod. And this is essentially Apple's Siri-based assistant meets wireless speaker, and that's the best way to really put it. It's their answer to all the competition out there, like Amazon's Alexa or Google's Home, or all these other kind of smart home products. It's the HomePod is this mesh design, which arguably kind of mimics that of the Home, or their Mac Pro in a way. And it's this, really powerful speaker. It has an A8 chip powering it all. I think 7 speakers in it, or 7 tweeters, I should say. Has, of course, Siri built into it. So all the stuff you can do with Siri on your phone or on your Mac or what have you, it has all of that built into it, of course. So you can answer questions. It can tell you about the weather. But it also has a really powerful speaker that you can, of course, use Apple Music with, which they're obviously touting since they have a music service. And then from there, you can add on additional speakers, much like you could do with Sonos. I have a Sonos system in my room, and I can play in multiple rooms, and I can have each speaker play its own song. And that's the same concept with these speaker systems. You can implement them around the house to use as voice assistants and high-definition speakers. Now, whether or not these speakers are really that great and they're really touting them as great speakers is something that I think has to be tested in person, obviously, to really tell. It does implement some cool technology where it knows, like, for example, if it's in the corner of the room, how to bounce audio and how to sense kind of the environment around it. However, the price point it's coming in at is $350, which if you look at that compared to the other smart speakers out there, even the Sonos, one of my favorite Sonos speakers, the Play 1, is still cheaper than that. Granted, it doesn't have an assistant built into it, but as Amazon, Alexa, and other things like Google Home integrate support for Sonos, Apple, you're paying that Apple premium for sure. And at this current point, I think it doesn't have enough features to justify that price point. So all in all, I think Apple is responding in some respect to a lot of the stuff that's been talked about and that's out there. This is, a really big event for them, obviously announcing a lot of new stuff, but more importantly, it answered a lot of questions in terms of like what the future looks like and what Apple is willing to kind of dive into, whether that's VR or AR or the prosumer space with the iMac Pro. It is a step forward for them in modernizing their tech, whether it's like, again, macOS High Sierra and implementing a lot of that tech from iOS into macOS. And, for a long time where we saw iOS kind of taking things from the Mac, it's now the opposite way around. And the iOS has obviously over the years become the center of everything because everybody uses an iPhone or, some sort of iOS device. That unification, that integration across the devices, whether it's a MacBook and an iPhone or an iPad and a MacBook, has become closer and closer, and we're starting to see that, perfect balance between all of them. Is there a lot of stuff that I wish they would have done? Yeah. Is there a lot of stuff that kind of disappointed me overall, like iOS 11? For sure. I think while they're showing in some aspects a lot of willingness to move forward in some areas, I think they've taken a couple steps back in others. That's my overall thoughts. That's my personal opinion on the event. Some cool stuff. Personally, I'm most excited about the iMac Pro just because I'm a huge iMac fan in general. It's always been my favorite form factor and Mac out there in the lineup. So I'm excited to see that iMac Pro come out. But yeah, outside of that, it's all pretty standard stuff. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Hope you enjoyed my overview and thoughts on the WWDC 2017 event. Love to hear your thoughts and opinions. Leave them down below. And as always, thanks for watching.